The year is 2007. The very first iPhone was released, Bully McGuire swung into the scene, and Britney Spears shaved her head. But most importantly, a young Pookles was invited to second grade classmate Ethan's 7th birthday party. It was the party every young 2000s boy could ever want. Some pizza, the boys, and some sweet, sweet Harrison Ford. Little me wouldn't know it at the time, but this night would become very important to the interest and lore of future Poogles. Stick with me. You see, as a once young, insecure nerd, there's a handful of moments that any self-referencing nerd, like myself, can look back at moments that really capsulize the personality of oneself. Unfortunately for myself, this night would be one of them for me. Ethan invited us to his home, I'm assuming one Friday or Saturday night, to partake in a night of some fun with Legos and Nerf guns that would eventually culminate into a watch party of none other than Indiana Jones. Now, I don't really know if this is my first introduction to the Man in the Hat, but it's the earliest I can remember and definitely the one that stands out the most. So we're there, right? It's later in the night, we all ran around, played with some toys or some shit, some 7-year-old type shit, and now we're all just crashing and laying down, getting comfortable after having a lot of pizza and pop. So Ethan or his mom, I don't know, one of them is preparing to put on Raiders of the Lost Ark as we lay down. Awesome, right? A great end to a fun night. Well, the disc is a little scratchy and keeps jumping. So Ethan or his mom, I don't know, one of them grab the remote and go back to the menu and head to the chapter section of the disc to hopefully select the chapter we were closest to resume from where we left off of. We look at the chapter selection and try to determine where in the movie everything started to go to shit, and that's when I see it. It's here where I see that the first chapter is named The Man with the Hat, and my 7-year-old innocent dumbass self decided to say out loud, "The man with the sex." Needless to say, Ethan's mom and her friends were definitely not impressed by my attempt at a joke. Yeah, truly haunting moment in my childhood. But as traumatizing as that moment was, it never shook my unwavering love for Indiana Jones. It's such a timeless franchise that whether or not it makes sense or even works in 2024, which we'll explore later, it's a franchise full of pure magic and adventure. Now, I could sit here and dedicate this whole video talking about how great the franchise is, especially the first 3 films. And as much as I would love to do that, I think it's safe to say that Indy is universally loved, and I probably wouldn't be saying anything every fan hasn't already said or heard. From the beautiful settings to the iconic John Williams score and the piece of ass that Harrison Ford is, Indiana Jones is an experience with many elements that when separate make for a good experience, but when combined make for a definitively Indiana Jones experience. But while I believe the movies themselves are timeless and completely hold up today, at least the first 3, I do question its relevance here now in 2024, 43 years after the original release. Which brings us to January 12th, 2021, when Xbox first announced Indiana Jones and the Great Circle to the world, and followed with excited, confused, and even with whatever impressions. To say I was immediately and completely all in, excited, and not at all confused would be a total lie. Honestly, at the time, I didn't know what to make of the announcement. On one hand, it's Indiana Jones. On the other hand, it's a AAA video game, so of course immediately there's going to be a lot of speculations and questions that arise with that fact. What type of game is it? Is it an adventure game? Will there be puzzles? Is Harrison Ford going to reprise his role? How's it going to feel to play? Will it be exclusive? Will it be on Game Pass? Will it be third person or first person? So many well-warranted questions needed to drive the interest of the consumer. Of course, most of these questions would eventually be answered as we got closer to its release, revealing pretty well what type of experience we were going to end up with, but there were still 2 burning questions I first had all the way from the announcement of the game and still during my playthrough of The Great Circle. Well, 3 burning questions now that I'm hearing myself say it out loud. Starting with, whose fucking bright idea was it to name it The Great Circle? I mean, what a boring ass name. I'm not alone in thinking this, right? Seriously, what kind of Little Tikes Sesame Street ass name is that? If we look at the original, it wasn't even called Indiana Jones. It was just called Raiders of the Lost Ark. Badass. The Temple of Doom? Terrifying. The Last Crusade? I'm in. Kingdom of the Crystal Skull? Silly, but interesting nonetheless. Dial of Destiny? Weak, but at least it's got some alliteration. The Great Circle got none of that. Maybe I'm the only one disgusted and even downright offended by it, but I just can't believe that's the choice they settled on. Ridiculous. Aside from that, the two really hard-hitting questions that keep bothering me are, 1, does it make sense? Does the Indiana Jones IP make sense to adapt into a fully realized original single-player experience in 2024? And the other question is, does it work? Initially, that question was, how could it work? But with the game having now been released, we can now answer that ourselves. Which is actually where I want to start. Adapting Indiana Jones, much like any other popular franchise, into a project outside of their original medium can look different in many ways. Take the LEGO games, for example. They're not really adding anything new to the franchises aside from new fans, maybe. Those games are really just using those IPs as a backdrop to their already existing formula, which of course isn't a problem. In fact, it's great. But they're presented that way, showing it's merely an adaptation and not some grand new adventure set in the same world or timeline as the original piece of work. The Great Circle is trying to do that, presenting as if this is a new experience that is pivotal and maybe even canon to the story of Indiana Jones. Is this canon? I don't know. Maybe. It doesn't matter. I just know that the game certainly tries very hard to fit itself into the mix of what came before. We're told it's set between Raiders and Crusade. They really tried to sell the writing and performance of Indy, and hell, we even re-experienced that iconic first scene from the first film. Whether it's canon or not is not the question. We already know what transpires before and after. The question is, how could it work? If the game is going to present as if it is canon and that it is a definitive Indiana Jones experience, then they absolutely have to nail what it is that makes Indiana Jones Indiana Jones. As a longtime die-hard fan of the franchise who's seen all the movies several times and even the television show, I believe I know exactly what that requires. I believe there's 3 definitive aspects: the world and atmosphere, the sound, and most importantly, the character. Now, this is certainly true when adapting any material, but it's more so important to this franchise as those movies have a very distinct look, sound, and feeling when viewing. The movies, good and bad, have always managed to capture a sense of style that is so Indiana Jones, and it's kinda hard to put your finger on it because it's not doing anything too crazy or stylistic. You could easily credit it to just being an 80s movie, but it's more than that. It's the little things that all culminate to a complete idea that stands out from the average action adventure. Starting with the world and atmosphere. It's set in a time before, not too far, but far enough to separate itself from its time of release, using the Great War and the pre-technological Renaissance era as a crutch to introduce the historic MacGuffin as the driving force for the narrative. And while it might be simple, it allows the world to feel different, fantastical, yet familiar and grounded. And to accomplish that same feat in 2024, even further out from the events the movie takes place during and from when the movies were made, it's a very tall task. Visually, there are several aspects that go into making Indiana Jones iconic. We could talk about the dirty 80s film grain, the high contrast lighting, the real on-location sets, or the detailed caves, crypts, and catacombs. But I think there's more to it. One of the technically impressive aspects of the original films is Steven Spielberg's ability to beautifully capture both the subject and the environment effortlessly in a way that makes each and every frame memorable, showcasing the iconic characters and stunning sets. When watching, it feels so professional, so expertly shot, with every shot feeling like there's a story behind each and every prop or background character, while never taking the attention away from the subject that matter. It's so straight yet whimsical. It's hard to put my finger on it exactly. It feels almost like a silent film, something akin to a Chaplin or Buster Keaton movie. It's shot so intentionally but still plays out like a slapstick comedy. Director of the Ocean's movies, Steven Soderbergh, credits Raiders of the Lost Ark for having incredible staging, which, by his interpreted definition, is how all the various elements of a given scene or piece are aligned, arranged, and coordinated. He further goes on to prove this point by stripping all the color and sound from the film in a personal, full-length edit of his, focusing entirely on the visual narrative. This is a real thing, by the way. You can just go to his website and watch all of Raiders like this for free. It's incredible. I highly recommend it. But today, we're talking about a video game, so how could a game possibly capture this precise and intentional vision from Spielberg in an interactive medium where the player is in control of the camera? Well, it can't. It just can't. It's too random and unscripted to expect the player to capture any moment from their own lens in a way that makes it intentional and not frustrating. However, I do find there to be an opportunity for the creators over at Machine Games to precisely design their interpretation of an Indiana Jones world in a way that feels both cinematic and improvised, precisely staging buildings and caves and tombs and even props to not only look the part, but naturally guide the player to flow the story and action to reflect that chaotic but intentional vision of the movies. You do this by ensuring that all the various elements of a given piece or scene are aligned, arranged, and coordinated. That's certainly a lot to tackle and even a lot to ask as a consumer. After all, games aren't easy to produce, certainly not when adapting from a long existing franchise. One element that should absolutely be a toss up for the creators is the sound. I don't need to explain the work of John Williams. I think we can all agree that the music of Indiana Jones is nothing but incredible. Adapting that shouldn't be a problem. It should be a slam dunk. I believe it's the sound effects that really add a lot of importance and character. The crack of Indy's whip, the comedic pop from every punch, the ghastly sounds of light incinerating Nazis, and let's not forget the iconic Wilhelm scream, all give Indiana Jones that extra layer of style that just feels so Indiana Jones. Perhaps these were just sounds of the 80s, but hey, even when Indy moved out of the 80s, they were still there. I love it all. I find it so silly and charming, which feels kind of necessary for movies full of Nazis. Hate it or love it, it transcended decades, and I find it pivotal to the vibe of the franchise. But whether or not you believe the visuals and sounds of the movies are absolutely important to its legacy, I think we can all agree that the thing that makes Indiana Jones is Indiana Jones, the man himself, but more specifically, Harrison Ford. There's no doubt in my mind that Harrison Ford's connection to the Man in the Hat is the biggest driving force for the success of the franchise. Without Harrison Ford, I don't think we get 5 movies. I don't think we get a prequel series, and I'm sure we don't get The Great Circle. His commitment to the role is so flattering and hilarious. For someone as grumpy and stubborn as Harrison, committing over 40 years to the character is a sign of his unconventional love for it. An iconic character who always seems to bite off more than he can chew, followed by a quippy one-liner, while being able to look great being both a professor and an archaeologist who, for some reason, wears a leather jacket in a South American jungle, sounds like a sure hit for me, and I don't see anyone else being able to nail that besides Harrison Ford. So for a modern game rooted in narrative, attempting to star this titular character in 2024, that requires a tremendous amount of trust and faith. Now that we've established what makes Indiana Jones unmistakably Indiana Jones, we can move on to the exciting part, deciding whether the experience lives up to the name. So here's my quick review of Indiana Jones and the Great Circle. Stupid ass name. Like I said before, going into the game, I knew the developers had one critical challenge, capturing the essence of Indiana Jones. This goes beyond simply portraying the iconic character. It's about recreating the entire atmosphere, the adventure, the intrigue, and the unmistakable vibe that defines an Indiana Jones story. I'm pleased to report that The Great Circle does a remarkable job on delivering on this front. The game masterfully captures the spirit of discovery and danger, seamlessly blending thrilling moments like uncovering ancient secrets in the Vatican or exploring the ruins of Giza with action-packed sequences, including the ever-satisfying act of punching Nazis. Initially, I expected the gameplay to lean heavily on the Uncharted formula, a natural assumption given Uncharted is widely regarded as the spiritual successor to Indiana Jones. However, the game takes a refreshing turn by adopting mechanics more akin to the modern God of War series. Rather than relying on linear gameplay style, the Great Circle features expansive open zone environments that serve as playgrounds for exploration and discovery. These areas are rich with opportunities to unearth secrets, tackle side missions, and collect artifacts. Each location, from the intricately designed architecture of the Vatican to the remnants of an ancient civilization in Giza, is stunningly detailed and imbued with a sense of history. Even interactions with local cultures in Southeast Asia feel authentic and contribute to the impressive storytelling, making the game feel like a true Indiana Jones adventure. The open zones are easy to get lost in the best and worst possible ways. Swinging across chasms with Indy's whip, Scaling ledges and uncovering new markers and hidden areas create a sense of organic exploration. As you progress, new missions and collectibles emerge, rewarding your curiosity and engaging you to delve deeper into the game's world. Collectibles in the game serve multiple purposes. Some are purely for the thrill of preservation. After all, they belong in a museum.
That belongs in a museum!
While others offer tangible gameplay benefits. These items can enhance Indy's abilities, making him tougher in combat or more adept at navigating the environment. This RPG-like progression system adds a layer of depth, allowing players to tailor their experience and feel a greater sense of investment in the character. While all these elements are inherently good in their own right in video games, I'm not convinced if it was right for this video game. At least the open zone and RPG-like elements. I might even go as far to say that if Indiana Jones wasn't attached to this, I don't think people would like this. I don't think I would. Traversing the lush, detailed environments in a way that mimics Indy's adventurous spirit feels like a dream come true, but the execution often stumbles. The experience can become clunky and tedious, weighed down by RPG mechanics that feel out of place. For example, repeatedly solving minor puzzles or scouring for loose change to unlock perks like a speed boost for scaling with Indy's whip or shimmying across ledges feels less like an exciting challenge and more like an unnecessary distraction. At times, it even borders on offensive to the character's legacy. The combat doesn't fare much better. The game encourages stealth, offering an abundance of blunt objects like shovels and bottles for players to quietly pick up and knock out unsuspecting enemies. At first glance, this feels like a clever nod to Indy's resourcefulness and his status as a mere mortal rather than a superhuman action hero. It also seems to invite creativity, allowing players to approach scenarios in their own way. However, this illusion of choice quickly fades due to lackluster enemy AI. Enemies often follow predictable patrol patterns or stand idly by until a sound briefly rouses their attention. Even then, their investigations are laughably short-lived, and they soon return to the pre-programmed routines. This lack of challenge undermines the effort that clearly went into crafting the combat's tactile feel. Punches, swings of a shovel, and other melee actions are beautifully animated with satisfying slapstick sound effects that evoke the charm of the films.
Sorry, not much to write home about.
Yet, the clunky AI robs these moments of the potential impact, leaving combat feeling shallow despite its cinematic presentation. Where the game truly shines is in its puzzles, storytelling, and character work. The puzzles are where it easily fares the most to the Uncharted games, which is great because, after all, like I said, those games are already the spiritual successor to Indiana Jones. The inspired has become the inspiration. Puzzles in the Great Circle are clever, diverse, and complicated enough while never being frustrating, which I find this dichotomy to be incredibly impressive for how rare it is to come by in games. They'll have you sit back and examine all the pieces, contemplating your sequence of events and options available, providing all you need to easily succeed in your objective without overcomplicating what can or should be done. It's just robust enough to feel satisfied upon completing one. The narrative is a sprawling adventure brimming with rich historical detail, taking players to breathtaking locations while unraveling a mystery worthy of the Indiana Jones name. Stretching such a story over a 15+ hour experience is a bold departure from the films, which have always delivered their thrills in under 3 hours. Yet, the game manages to maintain intrigue and momentum throughout, keeping players invested in the unfolding drama. The characters are another standout aspect. As expected from a AAA title, the writing and performances are top-notch, capturing the essence of the franchise while offering fresh takes. Indy's supporting cast feels unique and multi-dimensional, with quirks and personalities that make them relatable and engaging. Even the primary antagonist, a Nazi, as tradition demands, is more than a cookie-cutter villain. While his background is inherently reprehensible, his exaggerated presentation and theatrical flair make him a compelling foil for Indy.
I have mastered the lethal Japanese hand-to-hand combat art of karate.
The standout companion character is another highlight. She's not merely a love interest or a damsel in distress. She's a self-sufficient, curious individual with her own stake in the adventure.
Oh! Thanks.
Her dynamic with Indy is natural and enjoyable. adding depth to the story without overshadowing its titular hero. And then there's Indy himself, brought to life by Troy Baker in what might be the game's most pleasant surprise. Baker's performance captures the essence of Harrison Ford's iconic portrayal, from the dry wit to the rugged charm.
Yeah, let me finish, please. I fear that my mother-in-law is with the child also.
Jesus Christ, what have you done?
Wait. You are not a priest.
Sorry, pal, but you kind of deserved it.
His attention to the character's mannerisms and tone is nothing short of remarkable, ensuring that Indy feels authentic rather than like an imitation. This performance could have easily fallen into uncanny territory, but instead it elevates the entire experience.
You should have become an archaeologist, Father.
Oh, well. It's never that adventurous.
While the game stumbles in its mechanics, particularly the RPG elements and combat, its narrative and character work carry the adventure. For fans of Indiana Jones, this may not be the perfect game, but it's one that succeeds in delivering a story worthy of the whip and fedora, and one that, despite all my criticisms I still deeply enjoyed and recommend to all gamers that even have the slightest touchstone with the franchise. So now we ask the question once more, does it work? Does the game successfully accomplish adapting Indiana Jones into a video game? As a gamer first, I want to give it a reluctant yes. As an Indiana Jones fan, I'm giving it a resounding hell yes. While it's the actual gameplay that I feel lacks the most from the video game experience, it's not offensive enough to take away from the Indiana Jones experience, which is all I could have wanted from this game. The game is bloated by the extra layers of unnecessary video gamey aspects, sure, but that never takes away the thrills and charm I feel while playing this game like I do when watching the movies. It's impressive and maybe even a miracle that Machine Games managed to capture the magic that made fans around the world fall in love with the franchise. That leaves one question left. Does it make sense? Does it make sense to adapt Indiana Jones into a video game? A video game that is really trying to capture the spirit of the movies by emphasizing on narrative and, let's not lie, nostalgia. My first thought of this question initially spun off into several other questions. Like, does this make sense for Xbox? Does this actually generate interest? Do the new generation of gamers even care or even know Indiana Jones? The problem with this question currently is only time will tell. And unfortunately, this industry eventually will decide based on sales. Even as a massive fan of the series, I question its relevance today. For fans of the franchise, you'd think it would be a massive hit, considering that a new cinematic entry released only the year prior. However, if we look at the box office results of that entry, The Dial of Destiny, it was the worst performing entry in the franchise, which begs the question even more, do people even care about Indiana Jones anymore? Based on box office results, I would say probably not. Of course, the current state of movie theaters and the box office is a bit rocky, with all the streaming platforms and COVID turning people off. Plus, the actual movie-going experience, I feel like is getting out of hand. Like, theater etiquette feels like it's at an all-time low. People are just like talking and on their phones. Oh my god, it drives me crazy. Is anyone else feeling that? Anyways, for me to solely decide whether this franchise is alive and still has some juice would just be biased and maybe even arrogant. I think fans like myself are 100% down for a new experience anytime, only should it be faithful and refreshing, which is why we also have to ask the question whether this game even works in tandem with, does it make sense? While I believe the Great Circle does work and is deserving of the Indiana Jones title, I fear it may not make sense in 2024. I think we can all agree that Xbox has had a rough outing in the last and current generation, and even though I only play on PlayStation, Switch, and PC, I still hope for the best for Xbox and fans of it. I hope for the best of all games and makers of them to deliver something great, something that simply generates joy to fans of this medium. Xbox really needed a win. I just don't think this is it. On paper, this sounds like an intriguing idea, allowing the creators of the Wolfenstein games to do what they do best and create something new in an already existing and beloved franchise. Hell, they already proved they know how to satisfyingly defeat Nazis. But when we consider that the original movie released over 40 years ago and that the last decade ushered in so many more gamers, young gamers, I don't think people are going to be looking at this game like we would for a PlayStation first party game. I think it's safe to believe that Bethesda was already working on this game before the acquisition. But for Xbox not to double down on this game and present it as the next first party entry for Xbox feels like a disservice to not only the Indiana Jones brand, but to their own as well. And it very well could be that Bethesda was already working on it and Xbox just didn't simply believe in the Indiana Jones brand. That could just be me talking out my ass. It could just be me being a massive fan of Indiana Jones and maybe expecting too much from casual gamers. After all, gamers are some of the most ungrateful groups of people out there. But I get it. If I were to give this game a rating out of 10, I'd probably be in the 7 range. 9 if we're just talking about the Indiana Jones experience, but 7-ish if we're talking about the game as a whole. And for a lot of people, that might not be good enough, especially when this stuff costs money and there's many other experiences out there that more validate the use of their time. Marvel Rivals released merely days before The Great Circle and it lit the gaming world on fire. And it's free, so to decide over Indiana Jones, a game that might not be that great and a franchise that you just really don't care about, just might not be validating. Only time will tell whether the game met expectations, and I don't just mean financially. If we look back on this game even a year from now and think, yeah, that was a good time, then I consider that a success. Originally, I was only taking on this task of playing the game and making a video about it purely for my love for the franchise. I did not imagine falling in love with this game. And while I question its place in time, there's no doubt in my mind that, yeah, it is a good time. So does it make sense? Who fucking cares? If you're a fan of Indiana Jones, I think it's worth your time. Well, there you have it. Another one for the books. Feeling good about this one. I've had a lot of fun playing and I can't believe that this game actually came together. I really had very little expectations and I'm pleasantly surprised. Sorry this one took so long to get out there after my last video. I had a lot of ideas of what I wanted to talk about next. I wanted to do a Black Ops video, I wanted to do a Stardew Valley, even a Power Rangers video. I even wrote a complete script for the Black Ops video that was like 30 pages long. It was ridiculous, but with work and the holidays and my girlfriend breaking her fucking neck, things just kind of got away from me. I'm planning to really hone in the new year and just start grinding content for you all, so look forward to that. I got a lot of ideas and don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss out on them. I'm actually currently recording this on Christmas Day, but it'll probably take me a couple days to get this edited and out there, so whenever this goes out, Merry Christmas still, Happy Holidays, Happy New Year, whatever it may be. Thank you for watching and I'll see you in the next one.